Okay, it is Tuesday, July the 9th, 2019, and welcome to week 2 of Realities in Criminal Justice. That means we're 1/3 of the way through at the end of this week. It may sound funny saying that since this is week 2, but it is because week 4 would represent 2/3, and then week 6 is the final part of it. So, I'm going to go right to sharing my screen with you. Okay. One of the things that I want to do, because I'm not going to go over all these details again, is I'm going to point out to you the schedule that we have for the live lectures. Today is week 2. And then next week, week 3, 4, 5, 6, all are on Tuesdays. All are on Tuesdays. Every lecture that you have in this course is on Tuesday. Here is the recording for the live lecture that you each had to give me the keyword, and most of you found pretty well what that is. Most of you already knew the keyword, but you didn't know that was going to be it. But what I want to do is start out by going back to week 1 for a minute, because I'm getting a lot of questions about it. And here it is. And I want to talk about this. I want to talk about the assignment for the project and clarify to some of you who've asked me questions. The answer is you are conducting, and it says right here, if you go back and read the overview in Module 1, 2 interviews, not 1, but 2 interviews. The first interview is a news crime reporter. And a student had asked me, could they do it from a newspaper? You got to read these things. You got to listen to what I say in the lectures. It says a news crime reporter from a local newspaper. Did you hear me? So you can use a newspaper reporter, radio, or TV station. So you got any of those modes. So be aware of that. The second interview will be with what they call a public information officer. What the public information officer is, the officer or the person designated by the organization to speak when crimes take place. The Chicago Police Department has a designated person that oftentimes you'll see them speaking on behalf of the police department. I am not talking about the chief of police. I'm talking about the person who is the person who communicates with the media and with the public concerning issues that take place from the perspective of the agency. So it can be a local, which is a city or a village, municipality, a state, a governmental agency that reports criminal acts, debates, politics. Now, there's the in Illinois, we have the Chicago Crime Commission. You can reach someone. You don't have to meet with them personally. You can do a phone interview and talk to them. There's other organizations that report criminal acts, debate, politics, etc. But the Chicago Crime Organization, they do that. I think Illinois has one, and I think almost every jurisdiction has something like that. All right, so that I wanted to clear up. So you're going to do an interview with each of these individuals. And the purpose of this is to see the perspective from the media, and then see what the perspective is from the organization. All right? So, and it tells you that the final project will be a report based on questions asked and the interviews completed. Okay? And the questions are asked and the interviews completed. The goal is to obtain a real-life perspective on crucial relationship between the criminal justice system and the media. media, which is the crime reporter, which, by the way, there is an organization called the Crime Reporter that does it. But you can do news networks. You can do your local police department. You can do various publications and so forth and so on. So that's the answer. So this week, you're going to deal with the interviewee selection. Interviewee selection. All right, so we're going to be talking about that in a minute. All right, so that should clear that up for everybody. So now let's go back to the course home. I also noticed that many of you submitted your initial post on the 3rd as opposed to the 2nd. You know that, especially those of you in this program, unless you're new, just a few of you are new, that initial posts are due, that was a mosquito trying to get, on Tuesday nights. And with the exception when the course starts in the middle of the week or something. But the course here started the 1st of the month, which was Monday last week, a week ago yesterday. And so therefore your initial posts are due on the 2nd, not the 3rd. And when you saw your comments that I put in there, many of you lost points because of that. There was only 2 who I had exceptions for because of situations, one of a military issue, and the other one had emergency travel situation. So, but other than that, you lost your 2 points. You lost your 1 point, rather. Should have been 2 because it's a total of 20 points, I believe now. But at any rate, the point of the matter is that Tuesdays and Saturdays. All right. So now let's look at our week 2. First Amendment rights. And you're going to look at the U.S. Constitution, which you don't have to read the whole Constitution, and then the FOIA. FOIA, for your information, when you see that abbreviation, is called the Freedom of Information Act. And the Freedom of Information Act, we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight and how it plays into the law. When I first started practicing, the Freedom of Information Act didn't exist, but it came on later, and we'll talk about that. So anyway, criminal justice and the First Amendment. And I'll cover that in just 1 minute. Then the discussion assignment, media and trial equality. And again, as I said, your initial post due on today, which is the 9th, and your reply post due Saturday. And I do encourage you to reply to more than 1 post. I see several of you did do that, and that's a great thing. That makes the system work better. And finally, there is a written assignment that relates to 2 things, state versus federal information and disclosure acts, and then your course project, your interviewee selection. All right, so all written assignments are due on Sundays, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then, of course, the rubrics, which I discussed last week, are found in the classroom under the Lessons tab. And, the details are found under the Lessons tab, and there are rubrics. And rubrics are very, very important. And then you know about adversity as a springboard to success, because that was your key thing last week. So let's take a look quickly at the course calendar. Last week's was a very long session, as you always know that I always talk about my background experience. I got someone that reached out to me that has heard it several times, and they tell me every time they hear it, and they've heard it in several of my classes, that it strengthens them and that it also encourages them, and they pick up some things that they missed before. because you should be aware that you're only getting the tip. If I gave you the whole thing, we would be probably doing a week-long series, probably 2 to 3 hours a day, and maybe even longer, because it's going to be condensed to a book one day in the future, and you'll get a chance to read that book, and you will have heard a lot about the situation. The idea is, once again, to get you guys to understand that your professor is someone who, as they say, been there, done that, been there, lived that, been through that, made it through that, and there are still challenges that still come up, but because those challenges that I early on met were pretty tough as well. I got a message from a student who told me that she had a loss in her family. I don't remember which class it was in, but the student said that the family member committed suicide, and that's a challenge, and I keep that person in my prayers because I understand how challenging it can be. But recognizing the fact that this professor that you have here, I recognize that life happens, and one of the main things that I do offer to my students is empathy in terms of the challenges and trials that you come through. You know, some of the ones I'm not very sympathetic with is, for example, if you don't turn in your assignments because you had a planned vacation. I'm not sympathetic with that. I'm sorry, I just can't. I go on vacation, I take my laptop. But anyway, the point of the matter is that you find yourself in situations where you have to prioritize in those or do things in advance. So anyway, just telling you how, remind you again of why I do the things that I do here. So here we are today, the 9th, and again, talks about the media and equality, which is the initial post, and then our live lecture, and then your reply post due Saturday the 13th, and then your 2 written assignments are due on the 14th, State versus Federal Information Disclosure Act, and then, of course, dealing with the course project, the interviewee section, which I'm going to talk about in just a few minutes, and then the other check mark is your live classroom keyword that's due on Sunday by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. All right, and then we'll be back next week with another session, which is a week from Monday, the 15th. So, all right, so now let's go into the actual module itself. Here we go. Looking at the assignments, again, in a 1 to 2 page paper, comparing your state's Public Information Disclosure Act to the Freedom of Information Act. Almost every state has some form of Freedom of Information Act, and they're controlled by that state law. But the federal law controls the rights as well, and you're going to cover each of these issues regarding that. And if you click on this, it actually opens up the federal statute, and you can see, for example, what's involved, and you can kind of read through it. I mean, you know, you don't have to read all of the language, but be familiar with how it works, or either you can also do some research to see what the purpose of the Freedom of Information Act is and what it is all about as well. Okay, and then you can check your states. For example, you could go and check the let me see if it pops up. It should. FOIA. And Illinois, and it tells you FOIA guide for law enforcement assistance guide to using the Illinois Freedom of Information Act, and then what the Freedom of Information Act is here in Illinois. And here it is, right here. For those of you who are here in Illinois, there you see it. And you can go through and you can read, you know, a little bit about what it says, explaining what your rights are concerning that and how it works. All right. So you could go through various jurisdictions just to show you. FOIA, State of Minnesota, FOIA. And then it tells you information about how you can find out about the FOIA in Minnesota, and it explains how to do a request, tells you what statute it's under. So there it is, how to request data from a Minnesota government entity, which is the same thing. So this is the Minnesota Data Practices Act, not the federal FOIA, but it does the same thing. And if you click on that, I'm just showing you how to get the information, and it gives you the steps, and it tells you their states, statutes, and so forth and so on. So you can do that in terms of helping you out. Okay. Now, once you've done all of that in your research, then of course it's due Sunday. Then here's your rubric, and the rubric tells you what you have to do. All right. Now don't tell me I couldn't find my state's Public Information Disclosure Act, because you might be looking and say, well, it's not called that. I just showed you an example. Illinois does call it that, but some jurisdictions don't. And many of you guys are in states like Florida, states like Wisconsin, Minnesota, Kansas, and other and various states, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, various. So you're going to complete this part, all right? And remember the requirements and the issue of dealing with APA. There is a special seminar for APA that's taking place. Took place tonight. There's one. They're going to have more, and I didn't post it in this class, but there is one. And if you want to know more about it, like I said, I've already given you the source to be able to find that information, but I can help you by, again, guiding you to, again, the Resources tab. As soon as I can move myself out of the way. I don't want to make it bigger. There we go. If we go to Resources tab, again, you can go to the APA toolkit. So you go to the APA guide, like that's already shown in here. And then it tells you about some tutorial sample papers, but it also tells you about some quick start information. It tells you about a website, and it helps you to find that information as well. All right. So there are webinars that also come about there. So we go back in terms of that. Resources tells you who you can reach out to. Tutors, even at the stage that you are, you can still go back and you can utilize tutors as well. All right. You can also take a look at this, and I'll just go ahead and see if I can pull it up for you. Let me see. Let's see. I'll go back to Okay, let me just go into another class where I have it, and I'll show it to you in a minute. Here it is right here. This is in my Introduction to Corrections class, and this is it right here. The new toolkit PDF. Let me copy it. See if I can copy it. Get rid of my name there. There we go. Let's copy it. And then let's go back to, mouse is kind of shaky here. Okay. And then let me go back and show you where I'll just put it in here. Paste and go. And this is, oh, let's see, that's not the one I want to go to. That is not what I want to go to. I want to go to the one that's in our course. Oh, I know how. I'll go back to where I was, because I want to show you where you can find out about that if you need to learn about it. Go back to pulling it up, and then let's just click on it. Okay, there it is. And then it tells you that on the 17th, there's a new student tutor panel, even though some of you are, you know, you've been here before, and it tells you the calendar series. Then it needs help with APA. Here we go, the basic seminars. There was one tonight, but then there's the next one is not until August the 13th. I think they record these as well. But anyway, I think that, you know, if you wanted to look at the calendar schedule, you can click on here, and it tells you about it. So that's over now. And I don't know if you can. If you contact Dennis Johnson, who's our librarian, they may have a recording. The registration has closed, and it tells you how you could find also more about that particular lecture. Okay. Anyway, the point of the matter is that there are ways that you can help yourself with APA. That's all I'm really trying to show you here. Okay. So anyway, aside from that, your disclosure discussion posts, media and trial equality, and the purpose of a trial by jury is to hear both sides and then determine the truth based on the information they presented. And then consider what level of media coverage should be known about the accused prior to the jury selection and trial, and answer these following questions. Is it fair that the media can publicize information about the accused prior to a fair trial? I kind of addressed that in detail in a post that I submitted today dealing with the First Amendment, which I'll be talking about in just a few minutes. And so the question that you're going to have to ask is, should the media be limited prior to trial in what they can publicize about the accused? Well, to be honest with you, I pretty much said the First Amendment allows, and the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, allows the media to publish information in a responsible manner prior to. After all, you should be aware of the fact that it's hard to take the media out of the formula, because the media is the watchdog for the public, and that the public is entitled to know things about it. And so somebody says, well, the public is eventually going to become jurors. Well, that's all true and everything, but you should also be aware of the fact that the public information should not adversely affect to the ability of individuals to make fair and partial decisions when they actually have information that's produced by the prosecution and the defense before them at the trial. Because oftentimes there's information that is not correctly produced before the trial, and then at the trial there is information that comes out that may change a person based upon what the media did. The media's role primarily is to keep the public informed as to what's going on around them, and to be what I call a watchdog, and to make sure that there's information. So there's a balance between the individual rights of defendants, and you're not talking to someone who's pro-prosecutorial, even though I did do that. You're talking to someone who was a defense attorney for many years and who represented individuals. I had a few high-profile cases, and I can tell you already that in those trials that actually did go to trial, those cases that did go to trial, the information that was known before didn't really affect the trier of fact, the judge in one instance and the jury in another, because of the fact that the evidence that was produced in that courtroom kind of, like I said, brought it out to those individuals. And then you also should be aware that as cases are high profile, there are a combination of things. One, I mentioned earlier, then jurors are sequestered and they're kept away from the media. That's not the same for judges. Judges are supposed to be able to take the information and be neutral, but that's not the way it really works in the real world. That's why we as lawyers were really partial to jurors. And then the other issue that takes place is that oftentimes judges will issue what they call gag orders, and gag orders are legal under the law to prevent the individuals, the lawyers, the parties from discussing with the media any information that takes place during the trial. The trial has to be a public trial, and now you're beginning to see that trials now are on TV, and you'll also see the preliminary things that are on television as well. So the public right to know is so important. And then it says, should opinions of the accused be saved for the end of the trial so the accused have a fair and impartial jury of peers? I've already explained that, and we have one of the best systems in the world. Most countries don't have the system that we have, and I would not trade the system that we have for any other. Be very careful when you get closed-minded and say, well, the media reports things so quick. Yes, but the media reports it as they receive it. And remember, part of your assignment that you're doing is generally the media will get information from the public information officer or the person who is for the law enforcement agencies that are involved. The federal, state, and local agencies designate individuals to speak on behalf of them, not the individual officers themselves. That's a no-no, because most organizations have a policy against those kind of things. Unfortunately, you have organizations that are also very, very biased that will present positions like the Fraternal Order of Police, and oftentimes you have to be careful about some of the statements that they provide. Here in Chicago, most minorities are leery of the FOP's approach to dealing with issues involving police and defendants, because many of the defendants are African American or minorities. And because of the fact that Chicago has demonstrated down through the years, going back to years and years and years ago, some pretty bad things that police have done to individuals. I'll talk about that in a few minutes concerning yours truly, something that nearly happened to me years ago, but I'll talk about that in a minute. So now let's talk about the course project. The course project, again, interviews you'll select 2 separate professionals, a public information officer for a law enforcement department, police department, or sheriff's. Um, a newspaper reporter might be working for them. There's many individuals who work as former reporters who end up being spokesperson for those agencies. The second will be a news reporter from a local news station, and you do better with local as opposed to national. And you're around big enough cities. In Wisconsin, you got Madison's pretty big. Milwaukee's pretty big. Minnesota, you got Minneapolis. You got St. Paul. And then in other jurisdictions, Florida, you got Tampa, Orlando, all the places where the campuses are located in those kinds of situations. Fort Myers. So you have some major. So finding the news reporter, and it talks about most national and local news organizations have a reporter who's a crime beat reporter, and they do, and they report on crime. And you could check by calling the newsroom, and they're really always willing to work with students, trust me, and are open to helping you. You just have to reach out to them. You can choose also a major newspaper or a smaller local newspaper, a television station, or a radio station in your area for a face-to-face interview. Interviews with newspaper reporters are generally good when they're done face-to-face. And you don't have to do like 6, 7, 8 hours. You can do a 1-hour interview, 2-hour interview, and let them share with you how they arrive at decisions. But have your questions, you'll have them already prepared. So now what you're going to do is select the agency and the individuals. Or you can do it by phone if you're some distance away. But the key thing is to the news outlets all do some crime reporting, and you'll learn a whole lot about that. And then they're talking about, so that's how to find a news reporter. The POI, that is the Public Information Officer, you could find on their website for the agency, okay? Or email the agency's press information officer, and they'll provide that information. And, they can explain how they work and try to set up a face-to-face meeting as possible. Locating reporters for the interview, and it tells you various ways and so forth. But you need to do it right away. You need to do it right away. And don't tell me in an assignment statement, I'm having trouble having them get back to me. No, they're readily able to talk to you, and they like to help students on a regular basis. Something also you should be aware is many universities, I don't know about our school, has a journalism program, and the journalism program generally have individuals who are students or either connected to that kind of thing. But I have picked up the phone many a times and reached out and talked to some of the news people that I see on television to ask them questions, and they provide information as well. Many of them are on Facebook. I have friends from ABC in Chicago, Cheryl Burton. I have Hosea Sanders, Linda Yu, who's retired, Carol Marine, who's on NBC. She's a good one on NBC in Chicago. These are just to name a few. So anyway, so you submit this information in a Word document with the following information, and it tells you in the rubric, again, what is expected of you. See, you'll provide the name, company, address, phone number, and email address of the PIO. You'll get 40 points for that. Provide the name, address, phone number, and email address of your reporter, whether it's a newspaper or a TV reporter, you'll get 40 points to that. contain a one-page outline of the plan that you have, including the following: how the interviews will be conducted, whether it be in person, phone, or a combination, and set the date for the interviews. Kind of tentatively set a date. I know sometimes those have to change, but you want to have those done. All right. So you have time to get them done, but you have to get on it right away. Then, of course, though, remember the format that you have. You're dealing with APA and grammar and things like that. You're going in a professional fashion again. When you do meet with these individuals, you're not going like you are going to the beach or someplace like that. Okay, go in a professional way, and that's the course project. And then, of course, your live lecture. All right. So now I'm going to spend the rest of the time talking about the details of this lesson content. And then criminal justice and the First Amendment, written assignment. I already talked about the discussion, course, so forth. All right. So I want to talk about, first of all, before I get to that, and this probably would fit in some other instances, but you need to be aware of this. The media is so important. And again, we already know about the First Amendment, freedom of religion, press, and expression, so that you can have reported that information. There's plenty of information out there for that, plenty. And we don't want to stop the media from reporting news. I was just recently listening to a decision that the President of the United States had decided to block individuals who, from his Twitter account, who disagreed with him. And the courts have issued a ruling saying he's a public figure and his actual Twitter account is a public account, and that he's not like individuals that are not in the public's eye, and particularly one who holds as important a position as he does, so as to censor individuals whose positions contradict what he states. So the point of the matter is, that goes right along with what I'm saying, is that we don't want the courts to censor the reporting sources, such as the newspaper, the media. I do a talk show myself, and when I'm on internet radio, I say the things I want to say on a public basis. You have many individuals. Roland Martin is an example, who formerly was with CNN, and you'll see him sometimes on there. But even the reporters themselves provide various positions that are Mario Cuomo, and there's many others who are able to comment about issues that take place. And in fact, one of the things that we deal with involve letting the media conduct investigation and reports about issues. Now, before this case took place, the Laquan McDonald case, many of you are familiar with it, but I'm going to share in just a minute a little clip from a trailer of a show that I looked at on Showtime that was gathered. But this information, much of it is from clippings from newspaper reporters, from even the attorneys, and from others that are involved. And some of this information was out there before Jason Van Dyke's trial. And you'd have to do some more research to understand what that's all about. So as individuals who are in criminal justice, we have to respect the media's right to report. And that was one of the things I was saying to many of you in the posts that you were doing. And most of you I don't think if any of you have ever been a criminal defense lawyer representing defendants, and I was reading some of the positions that you guys were taking, and you can't shut out the public. You can't shut out the media. That's what this whole freedom of information is all about. It says, however, the amendment does not specify how accurate or factual reporting must be, but the actual reporters themselves have professional responsibilities and codes that hold them to a certain standard in terms of the information that they must report. And so this is an idea about what it's all about. So I'm going to go through this, and then I'm going to share things I said earlier about myself, and then this Laquan McDonald. So we deal with FOIA, or Freedom of Information and State Statutes. And as I said to you when I first started practicing, which was in '78, there was no FOIA, no Freedom of Information Act. In fact, through the Freedom of Information Act, guys, because when I was in college and even in law school, I was parts of protests and demonstrations dealing with issues that relate to civil rights. My name ended up in a FBI file called COINTELPRO. And if you go and do some research, you'll see what it was all about. And what it was is that the federal government was looking at individuals who spoke out against what the government was saying. Now, it's not like Russia, but what they were doing, they were gathering information and data. And so what that had to do was file what we call a FOIA request under the Freedom of Information Act, which allows not just reporters, but individuals to get a public record. That is how this video that came about in the Laquan McDonald case because of FOIA requests. And there is the federal, as we talked about, and then the states themselves each have their own separate agencies. And so what happens is that reports become public record after information is provided by victims and witnesses and are written by law enforcement in a police report. I was able to get, with the Jesse Smollett case, a copy of the police report for the entire investigation because someone filed a FOIA request and they got it. Now, what they did do was they redacted information like the addresses and even some of the names of some of the individuals in there, because those were used for law enforcement purposes. But when I did my discussion, which I did an extensive discussion on Facebook, I discussed the issue of what happened in that investigation. And so this is something that has opened up the ability of the public to be able to review and see. But what I'm getting ready to say is that with the Laquan McDonald case, you're going to discover that there was one perception about what actually happened in the events that led to the death of Laquan McDonald and what occurred with the shooting that took place of 16 shots by Officer Jason McDonald in Chicago. Because of Freedom of Information Act, there was a dash cam video that was kept away, and when you see the full story, and it's available on Showtime now, I hope they'll make it available outside of that, which I believe they will after a while, and the reports make it clear that the police version of what they said happened was contradicted by their own dash cam. So these Freedom of Information Act requests are able to be submitted and can go to court and get that information. And so it says these reports are generally completed within 24 hours of the reported incident. Within 24 hours. Some information that I said is redacted to protect the identity of the victims and witnesses, but the overall. So when a case is in a trial stage, there's a lot of media attention because the public wants to know what is going on. For example, there's a young man now, and I can't remember his name, in Illinois, who is who's been convicted of murder and taking a person and holding them hostage by kidnapping and killing them, but the body has never been found. But there's been a lot of information released during the investigation, which showed him at rallies and things like that, trying to even find the individual. Anyway, the media put these things out. Well, he just finally went to trial, and now he's at the point of being tried for the death penalty. Illinois doesn't have a death penalty, but because this is an international student, it went into federal court. And so the information that's being presented by the media is to let the public know what's going on around them. Okay? Elements of the criminal act are presented and debated at trial to find if the person was guilty or innocent, because oftentimes there's more open information that comes out at the trial than what you thought you knew from the media. And so the facts presented are based on the laws for each state but the accused, but sometimes it is misrepresented by the media, and it's also sometimes misrepresented by the criminal justice professionals as well. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. So anyway, there's individual state and data. Here's a spreadsheet which shows you what I was trying to tell you earlier. If you click on this, and it tells you how to find the spreadsheets. I'm not going to open that because it's Excel, but you can click on it yourself, and it tells you how the states operate and how to find the information. All right, and then there's a key terms exercise which you can do yourself, which, let's see, I'm not going to run for updates. I'm just going to allow it, and it's going to open it up. Here we go. And then roll over each section of the pie chart to learn more about the First Amendment, and it tells you about the First Amendment. Then it tells you about the Freedom of Information Act, and it's interesting. It says it was enacted in '66, but it didn't take effect until later. You'll see if I move this. Let me move this out of the way. Okay, you can see. Took effect, it says, on '67, but it didn't really grow into really operating until later after that. This was while I was in school, and the agencies had to do certain things, but it evolved and got stronger. Then there was the Watergate scandal in '72 and '74 that brought it to even more details. The key thing is that you need to understand is that the Freedom of Information Act, which came about in '66, I said '86, so I meant '66, and when you 66, but it didn't really gather much fodder until later. Again, I used it to find some information out. I also used my Freedom of Information Act to get some information in my transcripts that I needed to get back from high school in those days. So anyway, there's been a lot of issues involving Watergate, media scandals, and juries and the mass media. Here I was telling you about COINTELPRO. There it is right there. This is what I was telling you about, FBI secret counterintelligence program. And I mean, this was something. It tells about how news reporters found out about the existence of these documents. And again, my name, yours truly, was listed in a file. Almost every protester I knew. Man, Dr. Martin Luther King had such a file that they tried to call him a communist. And any individuals who came out and dealt with things. So you can take a look at that. So there are some issues that you guys are not familiar with because you're too young. But so now I want to go back and I want to share with you this Laquan McDonald case. Let's go back to the course home. And I just want to just show you, because you may not have had a chance to look at it. And I want to copy. It's called 16 Shots. Let's see if I can get it right here. No, I want to get the whole thing. I guess I have to go. I got to get the whole thing. Shoot, I had it. There we go. Let's copy it. Okay. That's not what I wanted to get to. No, I want to close that down. Okay, here we go. Now let's go to this. Let's paste it. And then let's go. So I'm going to take my headset off. I want to put the closed caption on.
Chicago Police Department averages maybe 30 police shootings a year. I think it's a level of people being desensitized from the violence. When you look at the police reports that were signed off, it's a justified shooting. If somebody gets near you with an open knife. I'm sorry, but that's a threat. What the local news put out there.
An individual with a knife coming at the officer.
That is not the story. This boy been shot, and there's a lot of bullet holes in him.
There is police dash cam video that contradicts the official story.
What we saw was, in our opinion, a first-degree murder.
There's an escalation of involvement from people across the city.
Justice for us is Jason Van Dyke being convicted of the murder of Laquan McDonald. He was their son. He was their brother. He was them.
Chicago has not had to reckon with what happens when you don't hold folks in law enforcement accountable.
Almost overnight, the power and legitimacy of city institutions cratered.
There's 86 minutes that are missing.
The Laquan case was not a cover-up. It's a story of our racial nightmare in this country.
This is acquitted.
Okay, and so that was the trailer, and I saw the whole thing. I still have it saved, and some of you may see it, but you will discover in there how the police were saying that the media was misrepresenting, but the video that came from the police, after many requests, you saw the guy who was the reporter. His name is Jamie Calvin. He did a lot of detailed work along with some community activists to try to get the video released. And the city of Chicago mayor, the prosecutor at that time, who was Anita Alvarez, which resulted in the election of that black female that you saw, who is now Kim Foxx, the current prosecutor, and a lot of people are dumping on because of the Jussie Smollett case. But the truth of the matter is that she wasn't the prosecutor in the case, because a special prosecutor came in from Kane County, which is where one of our Aurora campuses is located, and his name was McMahon, and he actually prosecuted Jason Van Dyke, and Jason Van Dyke was subsequent by a jury found guilty of 16 counts of aggravated battery with a firearm, as well as second-degree murder. Of course, the judge did a disservice to the community and to the people by not sentencing him on the 16 counts, which were what we call Class X felonies, which represented 6 to 30 years for each one, but instead he sentenced him on a second-degree murder offense, which is probational. He did not give probation, but what he did was he gave Jason McDonald, a police officer, 3.5 years, basically 7 years, but he could get good time with that under that one. If he was convicted, I mean, if he was sentenced under the Class X felonies, he wouldn't have qualified. So anyway, there's some real issues. And so what I'm trying to bring to your attention is that this is a classic example, and it's seen all over the nation. You guys who have Showtime, go back and see if you can maybe find that and take a look at it. It's a very long documentary, and it gives you some vivid details about what happened. And it's not one side. The FOP, Fraternal Order of Police, present their side. McCarthy, who was the chief of police at that time, who later was fired by the mayor. The mayor decided not to run again. It was, and then Anita Alvarez, the prosecutor, she ended up being defeated by Kim Foxx. The whole thing is that the political climate in the area where I'm living here was symptomatic of what's happening across the country. And you decide, you look at, you had one in Minnesota, Castillo, I can't think of the name of it, but you know which one I'm talking about. There was a case where, this was a rare case where the police were actually prosecuted. This was like, that had happened in my time in Chicago. And I've been involved in political investigations and police violence investigations for years and years, going even way back to 1969, dealing with the Fred Hampton assassination, which later it turned out to be an assassination. So there's and the police were involved there on the federal as well as the state. The point of the matter is that unfortunately there are some issues that would never come about, that the public would not learn about, but for the fact that the media is involved. So that's just one example, but you can go and you can check some of my remarks in your discussion posts, and you'll see some of those, and you can actually find many instances across the country. A young man by the name of Walter Scott was killed in, I believe it was North Carolina, where a policeman shot him as he was running and then tried to plant a gun on him. And that has, those kind of things do happen. Now, I'm going to close by sharing something with you that happened to me, yours truly. And it happened about 43, 44 years ago. When I was a freshman, a first-year law student in 1975 at Northwestern University School of Law, I had a old beat-up car. My car was like the car that, if you know about the old TV series with Robert Blake Beretta, I had a blue Chevy 283 Impala. And it wasn't the best of cars, but it ran pretty well. So I was in school, okay? And so I got that car. It was given to me by one of my friends. In fact, you heard me talk about them during my week one, where I lived with them for a while, and they were the ones who introduced me to someone who got me the job at the law firm in the mailroom. Anyway, they gave me this car virtually for $200, and I paid them like $25 a month till I paid it off. In fact, it was him, his name was Mr. Frazier, took me to the DMV, and he took me, and I got my driver's license there as well. My point being is that I was in school. I had in the back seat of my car my books, you know, so I did use public transportation as well, but because my undergrad I didn't have the car, but when I got to law school I got the car, and I used it periodically because you didn't run it all the time. But anyway, on one occasion I had this car, and it was parked in front of the law school. Now it's hard to park on the streets like that in front of law school. My law school is in what they call the Gold Coast area, right on what they call Lakeshore Drive and Chicago Avenue, right at the end. And you can look up and you can see Navy Pier, and you can see Lake Michigan itself right in front of you. So anyway, here I was sitting there in the car. So I was just sitting there and I was reading, and next thing I knew, I see lights coming behind me, police cars. And when I saw these police cars coming, I just continued reading. And the next thing I look, there's a police officer coming up on both sides of me, and told me to get out of the car. And I said, okay, what's going on here? They said to me this, what are you doing in this area, this neighborhood? I said, what do you mean? I says, I go to school in this building here. So this is Northwestern University School of Law. You go there? I mean, really? It was really that bad? And I was like, yes, sir. And I wasn't indignant. I said, yes, sir, I do go there. And they said, can you prove it? I says, well, yeah. I says, it's in my wallet. I says, now, I'm going to reach for my wallet, but I'm not going to be reaching for nothing that you think. So don't shoot me. And I was talking to them. Now, during this period, there were no video cams or none of those kind of things. I'm telling you what happened. And so anyway, the police officer, I pulled it out and I show them, and they see my student ID, and it shows me, and he said, yeah, that's you. So they said, so, okay. So they said, so you're going to be a lawyer? I said, yes, sir, I'm going to be a lawyer. And they says, okay, well, you know what? Maybe you won't be a lawyer. I said, I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean. They says, we could, and this is what I was told by one of the officers, says, we could put drugs on you and that would end your career. And I was shocked, kind of, but that was the tenor of what was happening, guys. I'm trying to explain something to you in reality from yours truly, who later will end up being a police officer, an investigator, and all these things. But this is in Chicago, guys, CPD. And so what happened is that they said, if we put that on you and you catch a record, you'll never become a police officer. I says, well, that won't be good because I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs. I says, I'm 25 years old. I've never been in any trouble before. And I said, well, that would end your career, wouldn't it? I says, yeah, but see that building over there? And I pointed across the street. I said, that's Lake Point Towers. He said, yeah, what does it have to do with you? I says, my mother, who at that time wasn't legally my mother, but she called herself my mother. I says, her name is Mary D. WGN. They said, what about her? I said, that's my mom. She lives there. I says, and there are plenty of reporters that I know on all the major networks who know me personally. So they looked at me and they threw my wallet back at me and said, have a nice day, and go. And I says, by the way, what made y'all stop me? I said, I was sitting still. They said something about a tail light. I said, I was sitting still, the car off in a parking space, in a legal parking space. So I'm just trying to show you, my point being, guys, is that yours truly, your professor, was headed toward being a victim where they could have aborted my career and changed my whole life. So I kind of am the way I am today. Yes, I know I teach law enforcement. I've been a police officer. I've seen corruption, but I don't care. That's why I said, guys, my thing is ethical, professional, and educated criminal justice professionals. And that's what I'm doing. I want to make a dent in the unethical practices. And so you're going to learn a lot about those kinds of things as we go through this particular course. And from me, I am not against the police. I'm against crooked anything. Politicians. I've been involved with some investigations involving crooked lawyers, crooked judges, and other individuals as well. Not as a defendant, but I did research, and there are reporters who've done work in here in the city. The point of the matter is that the media is now playing an important role in providing details, and there is a court case that is currently under review by the United States Supreme Court. It's called Nives, and then I'm gonna conclude. I want to share this with you, which deals with the issue of. I'm going to go and I'm going to open it up a minute. Give me a second. Send my content here. And let's see. This is all of my classes here, so give me a minute to come to it. It's a Supreme Court case, and I have the full case sitting right here on my desk, and I'm going to take some time and go through it. I think it's on page 3. It's on page 3. Maybe it's page 4. I think it's last page because it was one of the last things that I put up. I'm missing it here. I know it's in here. Let's see. Maybe I put it in. Maybe I put it in the class. Did I put it in there? No, it's not in there either. Let me see if I can share a desktop. Bear with me, because I want you to take a look at this. I got to go back, because I know it's in here. Go down, go down, go down. Go to page 2. Academic integrity. Gardner guidelines. Okay, then it's got to be page 3. Maybe it's page 4. I know I put it in the classroom. Oh, I can't find it, but what I am going to do is I'm going to go back here, and I want to share, see if I can share my desktop. Okay, let me see if I can share. Let me see if I can go down. See if I can. See if I can go to my desktop. Oh, I know how to do that. Just go to my desktop. Okay, let me minimize this. Boy, sorry for this, but I really want you to see this case. It's called Nivies. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I thought for sure that I put it in my course. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to Google it. N-I-E-V-E-S versus U.S. Yeah, oh, okay. I put it in my J355 class. That's what it is. Okay. That's where I can't find it. I knew I had it in one of my classes. Let me just go back and go to that. Oh boy, this is really apologize for that. There we go. Okay, let's go to my J355 spring class. And then let's see if I can find it in here, because I know it's in here. Content collection. Let's go here. There we go. Nivies versus U.S. And this is the case. And if you read this case, it's a pretty long one. Nivies versus Bartlett, and it involves a case that involves recording police officers in the process. So you want to take a look at that. Nivies versus Bartlett. That's the case. All right. But it's Nivies versus U.S. And then what I will do is I will email you a copy of this decision after this so you can take a look at it. And so anyway, I'm going to stop sharing right now and apologize going a little longer. The key word that I want to give you is media. That's what I want you to put in to get your points. All right. So take a look. Keep your eye out for this case. It's a very lengthy case. Like I said, I have it sitting right here on my desk, and so I'm going to email you a copy of that. So with that, I'm going to say good night. Have a good week, and I'll see you next week at the same time. Bye.